Welcome everyone. My name is Suzanne Pichetti Johnson and I'm the program manager for Avenues to Wellness. We are a program of the Frank R. Howard Foundation and this is our speaker series. Today I am very proud to introduce our guest speaker, Luna Hart. Luna is a functional diagnostic health practitioner with 20 years of experience in the healing arts. Her work is inspired by her personal health journey, which involved intense struggles and at one time left her feeling hopeless. Today, she is passionate about health education and co-creating personalized healing programs that address the root cause of health issues. Today, she will be speaking on the topic, Leaky Gut, the missing link to better health, hormones, and happiness. Thank you so much for being here today.
I actually titled this presentation Empower Your Gut because I feel like when you heal your gut, you have a sense of power, of strength, of resiliency, and you'll see why as we get a little deeper into the presentation. But we're really going to talk about this missing link between better health, hormones, and happiness in this presentation. And so here we go. Thank you for the introduction. I'll just dive in just a little bit more and probably reiterate some of the stuff that you said about me, which is I am a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner that is passionate about helping sensitive individuals find an empowering path to healing the root cause of their gut and hormone issues. With over 20 years of experience in the healing arts, I use functional lab testing for fertility awareness to uncover clues to unresolved health complaints so that you can return to the heart of your health and happiness. I'm also trained in somatic experiencing, that is some trauma therapy, and I'm especially interested in creating a safe space to heal the past trauma that may be affecting your ability to nourish yourself today. So how did I get here? I have kind of this really long health history, and it really all started when I was very, very young. I grew up on this extreme amount of antibiotics, and it was due to nobody's fault. Honestly, at the time, my stepdad was a pharmacist, and he just really had no idea. This was so many decades ago. We just didn't know the detrimental effects of antibiotics at that time. And I was having cyclical strep throat. So what would happen is, I would almost have strep throat up to 4 times a year. And at one point, the doctor threatened to take out my tonsils. And I remember running to him at a very young age, hopping into his lap and saying, "Please don't let them take out my tonsils." And so his answer to doing that was to give me my own bottle of amoxicillin, and I had that in my cupboard, and I just would grab that big bottle of amoxicillin and I would take it whenever I wanted to, however I wanted to, throughout all my school years. And it wasn't until I actually left for college that I realized there was an issue. I actually ended up with strep throat, and I remember calling him and just saying, "Hey, I got strep throat again. What do I do?" He's like, "You're a big girl now. You have to go to the doctors and get your own medicine." So, as stepping into that, it was like soon after that I started getting strep throat again and again, and I eventually took myself to a naturopath. And when I walked into that naturopath's office, I told her my story, and she's like, "Oh my goodness," she's like, "You need to figure out another way to heal." And so that was definitely the beginning of my health journey. And that was, back at age 18, 19. I just knew something was drastically wrong. And I had to really rebuild my gut from what I consider like ground zero, because antibiotics, does a wonderful job of killing off pathogens, but it also kills off that microbiome, that healthy flora. So, like I said, this was so long ago, before certain things were trendy, and I was really following my intuition. One of the first things that I did is I took myself off sugar, and I immediately had such a strong response from doing that. So I knew I was onto something. I was like, oh, this makes a huge difference. I feel, my brain fog, my emotions, all the things were starting to feel a little bit better. And then soon after that, I actually went alcohol free, and this was, I'm age 20, so this was a big thing. And then soon after that, I took out gluten and dairy, and I started to see a difference and a change. But at that point, I needed to still do some underlying healing of the damage that was done. So I found myself really rebuilding and rebalancing candida, eventually some parasites, and then even had to heal myself of this really deadly form of resistant bacteria. And that was probably at the worst for me when I kind of questioned if I was going to make it. And at what time during this journey, I actually thought I couldn't eat anything. And it was a very scary experience. I remember a friend holding me like a baby as I was crying and just being like, I was having this extreme reaction to everything I put in my mouth. It would be just a steamed piece of broccoli. I would put it into my mouth, and I would have a flush of heat. My cheeks would flush, my temples would pound, and I would have extreme anxiety. And so I had to really pull myself out of that reaction, and that was also a big part of my healing, was really working on that nervous system level to retrain myself that food was beneficial and healthy for myself. And along the way, I actually lost my menstruation from age 21 to 28. This was pretty huge. Those are like your prime fertile years, and it was one of those experiences where I would just run to doctor, and nobody would ever look under the hood. Nobody would ever ask why. Nobody would ask what I'm eating or what my lifestyle was or my stress levels were, or test me for underlying gut dysfunctions or anything. They only could prescribe me birth control and hormone replacement. So that felt like a pretty tragic experience. And I just remember at age 27 or 28, towards the end, before I got my menstruation back, going to one last doctor, and she was a specialist actually in Santa Rosa, and it was at the high-end Gordon Medical Clinic, and I just remember she didn't ask me any questions and just immediately wanted to put me on hormone replacement. And I just looked at her and I was like, no, I'm gonna figure this out, and I walked out of her office. But I also battled mold toxicity, copper toxicity, heavy metal toxicity, and my symptoms were endless. Like I had skin issues, boils, acne, bloating, gas, constipation, diarrhea, fatigue, brain fog, those menstrual imbalances, and I was pretty depressed. And now I'm actually 42, and I feel better than I've ever felt my whole life. And I'm not just saying that. It is really true. And I feel like I'm living proof that you can rebuild your gut microbiome and really heal from ground zero. So for this webinar, we're going to talk about seasonal energetics. We're going to talk about what is this gut wall and the digestive system. We're going to talk about leaky gut and steps to healing on a physical, emotional, mental, nervous system level, and how you could work with me. So you might want to bring out a pen and paper just to take notes along the way. So the seasonal energetics was something that I finally came to because I was such in a state of dysfunction that it was just too much all the time. So I had to find ways to peel the onion. And for me, working with the seasons was really huge. And really, these seasons do have an energetic in Chinese medicine. These seasons are talked about in this way, and even Ayurvedic medicine. So this is more like ancient knowing of the seasons have energies to them, and they also correlate and resonate with certain organs of the body. So there are certain seasons that are more aligned with cleansing and detoxing, and those seasons are the spring and the fall. So spring is a huge letting go time. It's really like where you're like letting go of like just the stagnicity of the winter, and you're really making room for that fresh green growth to happen. And then summer is this huge movement of energy. It's where we're moving, we're playing, everything, kids are out of school. Like the energy is really moving outwards in summer. And then autumn's another great time of letting go and cleansing, and so that's a good time also that I would focus and do some cleansing, and really the idea in the autumn is that you're cleansing and clearing the body that you can walk into that winter time with, the winter time being that stagnicity time, the time where we get colds and get sick and stuff like that. You can really walk into that winter time with more ease and grace. So once again, just keeping the flow of, cleansing on the cleansing seasons such as spring and fall, and then enjoying the summer and really nourishing and cultivating in the winter. And so this is something that I embarked on, but I also taught my clients, and this is what I teach my clients. And every spring on, social media, I'm always, tooting my horn for everybody to be doing their spring cleanse. And then once again, when we get in the fall, when I say cleanse, that's on all levels. That's physical, mental, and emotional, really kind of peeling the layers of what isn't serving you anymore so you can step into that next season. And here's a big web of symptoms. And I just share a slide like this because I feel often symptoms like on the slide are symptoms that people just kind of chalk up to like, it's just us getting old, or, oh, that's not too bad, I can still get by. But I do want you to know that these symptoms are not quote unquote normal. They are actually your body trying to tell you something and to show you that there are probably some underlying factors that could be supported and healed. And one place that I believe all these symptoms primarily on the slide correlate with is underlying gut imbalances and this leaky gut that we're going to start to talk about. I have a picture of the digestive system here because I always say it's hard to actually heal what you don't know what it is. This might be a review for some of you, and I will, hopefully, if it's a review, maybe you'll find some tidbits that are fun and helpful. So we have this amazing thing. We put food in our mouth and it comes out the other end. And that time frame, that transit time frame, can be anywhere from 12 to 72 hours. But more optimally, we want 24 to 48 hours. So sometimes I tell my clients to kind of test that because, obviously you don't want food passing through the digestive system too quick. You're not absorbing it that way. You're not getting your nutrients. You're not fully digesting. And then if it's too long, you're actually usually that food is putrefying and fermenting and stagnating and sometimes recirculating toxins. So you do want that optimal transit time. So sometimes eating things like beets and calculating when it comes out the other end, or something like chia seeds, or something that just you can see on the other end would be something great to do that in. And then I always like to say, we actually start to digest our food before we even put it in our mouth. We start to produce salivary amylase in the mouth the minute we think of food, the minute we smell food. So that is just this amazing thing, and we should also highlight that, to support our digestion, is like really take in the thought of eating what you're about to eat and allow yourself to smell it and get excited, because this is starting to produce enzymes in your mouth to specifically digest the carbs in your mouth. And then the next opportunity to optimize your digestion is when you put that food into your mouth, you'll start to chew it. And so this is where you really get a chance to optimize your nutrition, your ability to absorb that nutrients, is just chewing, and then chewing more. And then at that point of chewing, you actually will put that food into, the technical term is a bolus, and you swallow it. And then there's this peristalsis that will send that bolus down the esophagus. I can actually do a little pointing here. So we're right here going down the esophagus. And then we're going to hit a sphincter, the cardiac sphincter, and that's going to open up and throw that bolus into the stomach. And at that point, this bolus is starting to churn in some hydrochloric acid. And this is where the chemical digestion of proteins begin, and carbs continue to digest here too. And so hydrochloric acid is really important for digestion, and having the right amount. It's also a frontline defense for the body, hopefully strong enough to kill off pathogens, also do that digesting of your nutrients. This is also the place, if you've ever heard of proper food combining, this happens in that stomach area. Basically, proteins, like strong proteins, take 5 to 8 hours to digest in the stomach, and carbohydrates are, I believe it was 6 to 7 or 3 to 4 or something like that, and then fruits are more like 30 to 60 minutes. So you can see why you probably don't want to have cantaloupe with a steak, because what happens is you would put those into that bolus together and they would hit the stomach, and what would happen is just basically the proteins wouldn't allow that fruit to pass through quick enough, and that protein would putrefy and the fruit would start to ferment and cause gas and upset. So more sensitive stomachs, that can be a helpful thing to just keep, proteins and fruits aside. And people who are really sensitive actually do good with having high carb meals away from the proteins. But I think most people can actually have those together. And so after the digestion and the stomach happens, there's another sphincter that opens up and will put that bolus into the small intestine, which I always get a little tripped up with the small intestine because it's really not small. It's actually quite long. And if you take the small intestine and you stretch it out, it's anywhere from 20 to 23 feet long. And then if you opened it up and spread it wide, it can cover the surface area of a tennis court. So it's just an insane organ, and actually I kind of consider it one of my favorite organs. So we're going to get into it more because this is where the small intestine is where 90% of your absorption happens, and this is technically where this leaky gut happens. The large intestine can leak too, but the primary place where when we're talking about leaky gut, we're really talking about that small intestine. And what it is the small intestine. I have a better picture in the next slide, but it's like an accordion, and it's all these folds. And on all the folds are all these villi, and on all the villi are little teeny microvilli, and that's where all our food gets absorbed. So it'll pass through that, and then once again, there's another sphincter, the ileocecal valve here on your right-hand side, and that's also, once the bolus, which now is becoming the chyme when it enters into the large intestine, they call it the chyme. It actually will then be passing by this appendix. And the appendix is known to actually kind of spray some beneficial inoculate onto the chyme, actually. So it's another frontline defense. Also just really good to know about where the appendix is, because a lot of people have appendicitis or inflammation in that area. So if you have extreme pain on that side of your body, you want to get it checked out. And then basically the large intestine for the large intestine is actually about 5 feet. And they say if you go like this with your hands from fingertips to fingertips, that's kind of how long your large intestine is. And that passes, like there's an ascending that goes up your right-hand side, and then it goes across around this area, and then down the descending, and then there's the sigmoid, and then the rectum. And what happens there is it's that peristalsis again, and a little less nutrient absorption, but most of that happened in the small intestine, and more it's just kind of absorbing any last liquids and forming stool. So yeah, just to run through that all with you, just because we're talking about the digestive system, and once again, it's nice to know what we're trying to heal. And so let's talk about this great gut wall. What is this exactly? A healthy gut wall is crucial for digestion, immune health, mental, emotional, and hormone health. And 80% of your immune system is actually located in your gut. So I know at a time when we're all trying to keep our immune system super on par, actually gut health is one of the top ways that you can be doing that, is by optimizing your gut health. And this gut wall is considered your second skin. It defends the body against other bacteria and viruses and toxins, yet allows nutrients into the body. We're going to take a better look at this. So the small intestine and the gut wall of the small intestine is what we're looking at here. But these are actual like X-ray images. They're kind of blurry. I suffer from finding really good images of the small intestine. But this is a transverse cross section, and so these are all the little villi. And so these are the kind of the bigger villi, and if we actually zoomed in on this villi, we would see all these teeny little villi on this longitudinal cross section here. And this is just a nice cartoon image of this small intestine, and this is actually by Dr. Axe, and I appreciate his work because he was actually the first person who I ever heard really bring out leaky gut and like also correlating it with autoimmune conditions. And that was back, I can actually remember right when it was. He came out with his programs back in like 2015 or something. And I just appreciate his knowledge of just highlighting that this leaky gut actually has a huge component with autoimmunity. So yeah, this is his image, and on the left-hand side, over here, these are the villi. So this is a little kind of cartoon image of these villi, and these are the little microvilli I'm talking about. And this is the small intestine. So this is the stuff moving through the small intestine. So, we can't help it. Like, even if we are eating organic, we are getting some toxins, we are getting some microorganisms. Say we might be eating some possible inflammatory foods. And these are all going through our gut, hopefully along with a lot of nutrition too. And in a healthy small intestine, we're looking at, this is what it should look like. These villi and the tight junctions in between the villi should be very tight. There shouldn't be inflammation. Basically, it should be tight enough that it just allows the nutrients to pass through, but everything else, any other bigger molecules, to just keep going through and pass on out. But what happens is this leaky gut. And when the leaky gut happens, inflammation happens, and these tight junctions get torn open. And next thing you know, you have all these foreign materials entering into the bloodstream here. And when they enter into the bloodstream, your immune system goes on high alert. It's like, hey, those are not supposed to be there. And this is where all sorts of issues happen. And obviously, we were just talking about the autoimmune reaction that can start to happen when your body's seeing these foreign invaders where they're not supposed to be. Also, this is obviously nutrient malabsorption is happening when you have this leaky gut. And this is how we develop those food sensitivities. So back when I felt like I was sensitive to everything, I probably was on some level. I probably had extreme leaky gut, and I had this really extreme immune reaction to almost everything I was eating, and so I had to really pull myself out of that. So once again, if you feel like you're very intolerant to food, one of the first places you need to look is the gut and healing this. And also there's a blood-brain barrier breach that happens when this leaky gut happens, and systemic inflammation. And I see this often with my clients is they'll come in and they'll be like, I have joint inflammation, I have headaches, I have rashes, but my gut feels fine. And I'm just kind of like, I wonder about the gut, and I'm always like circling back. I can't help it. I wonder about the gut. And, so at that point we would do some functional lab testing and test a little deeper and actually find that there's huge things in the gut. They just weren't feeling them in the gut, and the inflammation would actually entered more of a systemic for them. So this is my list of things that contribute to leaky gut, and there's definitely probably more, but this is, just a good comprehensive list of 5 things. So contributors, number 1 is these inflammatory foods. And inflammatory foods, it's kind of like which came before which, you don't know. Like, did the leaky gut came before the inflammatory foods, or the inflammatory foods come before the leaky gut? But when you're in a state of leaky gut, usually there's some inflammatory foods online. And these could be just processed foods. These could be, just oils that aren't digesting well in your body, or these could be food sensitivities like gluten sensitivity and stuff like that. So assessing really what you're eating and choosing something better that brings down the inflammation so you can do the deeper healing work is important. And that was kind of a big part of my healing story. Like in the beginning, it's like I had to figure out, oh yeah, the sugar, oh yeah, and every time I took these certain foods out, for me, everybody's different, I noticed that like the inflammation was going down and I could do the deeper work then. Number 2 is stress and underlying trauma. So stress alone can cause leaky gut. And this is really important because, and I see this also with my clients, is we'll do all the things and they might still have some symptoms. And that's where we have to really go back to the stress piece and the underlying trauma. What is going on there that could be also causing this leaky gut? Number 3 is just an overgrowth of parasites, bacteria, yeast, and these pathogens live in what we call a biofilm. And biofilm is something that I learned about in my healing, and it just was a part, like to heal my gut, I had to really understand biofilm and break it down while also taking care of the pathogens I was dealing with. So biofilm, I'd like to describe it as, if you can imagine like a river and some slimy rocks on the bed of this river, that slime is actually biofilm. So if you actually tested the running water, you would get a test of that water. Most likely it'd be pretty clean because it's moving. And then if you did a test of that slime around that rock, you'd probably find all the life. You would probably find all the stuff. And that's what we actually do in our bodies, is we grow this biofilm to it actually protects and keeps these pathogens in our body protected. So this is where antibiotic resistance happens often. This is where sometimes some herbal protocols don't exactly get it. And so you always got to address biofilm sometimes when healing deeper gut dysfunctions. Number 4 is toxic exposure, and this is pretty huge, and I talk about this a lot, is that, there's no getting around the fact that we are being inundated with toxins on a daily basis. Even living where we live and, being pretty blessed, we still are getting exposed. So really just assessing that, and, for me, it's not like a doomsday situation. It's just becoming wise on these things and choosing options when you get options, and then doing that seasonal cleansing in the spring and the fall to really make sure you're dumping what I call the toxin bucket, because I feel like each individual has a bucket inside that they can pile toxins into, and then the minute that bucket gets too full is when we get symptomatic. That's when we get illnesses. That's when we are running to the doctors. So if every spring and fall we can be dumping that bucket, I really feel like, we're becoming wise to our current situation. Pesticides and glyphosate, and that's also something that I talk about a lot, is like, it's really kind of not getting around it. And sometimes we just have to do our best, choose organic, and just also do our inner cleansing and strengthening so we can stay resilient. And number 5 is, when possible, avoid things like antibiotics. You know my story, so this is no-brainer for me to say this. And you can actually you should Google, look at the 2,000-year-old poop that they found. They found this 2,000-year-old poop, and they studied this poop and was like, wow, we were such different people. Like, it just had like this incredible microbiome and such a richness. And the fact is as we're evolving as humans, we're actually getting a little less, and diverse, and that has a lot to do with our antibiotic use and just our sterilization of everything. And also be aware that other drugs like NSAIDs, acid reducers, and others, like all medication should just be assessed, especially if you're taking it ongoing, if it's going to disrupt your gut health. Then, I like to talk about decreasing the stress load. So I'm going to share 3 tips for decreasing stress load. And when I'm talking about stress load, I'm talking about internal stressors and external stressors. And so number 1 tip is to breathe. And it sounds so cliche, but it's amazing how people forget sometimes, and especially in stressful moments, like when you need to calm yourself, to pause and breathe. Another place, especially with gut health and trying to improve and optimize your gut health, if you can pause before eating and do some deep diaphragmatic breaths, this can really improve your ability to move into the rest and digest and to really absorb that food. Often we're just on the go, eating on the drive, and it is really actually important to absorb nutrients to be in a state of relaxation. So one breath that I like that is known to really put you into that state is called the 5-5-7 breath. And that's when you inhale for 5, you will hold for 5, and you exhale for 7. And if you even do that for 3 times, you're immediately putting yourself in a more peaceful state to absorb your nutrients better. Tip number 2 here is to improve your vagal tone. And with this, I'm talking about the 5th cranial nerve, the vagus nerve. And this nerve is a superhighway. It innervates from the base of our skull, down through our pharynx, through all our organs, and down through our gut to our reproductive organs. And this nerve is responsible also for that rest and digest. And so these are some easy, simple at-home techniques to what they call it vagal toning, when you're actually contacting that nerve and encouraging it to be active and working. And so things like singing, humming, and toning can actually stimulate this vagus nerve that's known to help you with resting and digesting. So isn't that lovely? Nice home tool. Another thing is gargling. So, probably don't gargle a lot, but how easy would it be to brush your teeth and throw some mouthwash in and do a little gargle? What it is, it's the vibration of the vagus nerve in this part of your body. You're actually vibrating the vagus nerve and encouraging it to be alive and toned. Also mentioning social engagement, it's a great way to help our bodies move into this more connected state and also release stressors. And I usually say tonic levels of social engagement because some people can get overwhelmed by social engagement. So it's finding the correct amount of social engagement that allows your nervous system to be seen, to relax, and to settle. Cold showers actually are known to help with the vagus nerve and that deeper diaphragmatic breathing. And then I list some therapies here. The SE is the somatic experiencing that I'm trained in, and that really truly is the therapy that brought me out of that reaction when I was flushing and having that experience that I couldn't eat all that food. And it's also actually what I've used to help get me to be a public speaker. I used to never be able to public speak because my throat would close up. And so somatic experiencing helps you heal these traumas on a deeper level and allows you to really be present in the here now. And so that work is really good. There's the DNRS, the EMDR, which is the eyes, craniosacral, acupuncture, and visceral manipulation. So if you're feeling like you're stuck in either like a sympathetic or fight or flight mode, or even if you're stuck in like a freeze or stuck in some kind of trauma, I do recommend getting some deeper support with some of these therapies. This one's already been said, which is the seasonal cleansing and just improving our body's natural ability on a daily basis to detox. This starts with the colon. It's considered the most important detox organ because basically if that isn't working, none of the other detox pathways are working. Making sure you're going to the bathroom often, 1 to 2 times a day. And then from there, it's also looking at, your skin's a detox organ, your liver, gallbladder, your kidneys, the lymphatic system, and the lungs. So just really optimizing these organs and doing things to make them healthy. And then I have to also address the mental emotional piece of healing this gut and this leaky gut. Often some of my clients who come in with really severe gut dysfunctions, there is this sense of boundary issues, like they've lost healthy boundaries. And like sometimes, when you have something like a parasite, it is a boundary issue. You have something in you living off you, and you have to reclaim your space. You have to reclaim that healthy boundary. Leaky gut in general is a boundary too. So we want to heal that wall, that gut wall, really healing boundaries on all levels, physical, energetic, really addressing your need for control, perfectionism, and finding a place to own your power again. A lot of people who have gut dysfunction really feel like they might have lost their power and sense of worth. And to talk about this mental emotional piece, anxiety and depression are really linked with gut health. This is on a very physiological level, and I've seen it with myself and with my clients. It's like often my clients really couple their gut issues with their sense of depression and anxiety. And for me too, I was surprised, like, oh, the depression was really all my gut the whole time, and I just needed to heal that first. And really what it is neurotransmitters, your happy brain chemicals, are actually made in your gut. So one of them, your serotonin, 90% of your serotonin, which stabilizes your mood, appetite, and feeling of well-being and happiness, is made in your gut. So you can see how if you have a gut imbalance, this serotonin is probably not being made properly in your gut. Serotonin is also a building block for melatonin. Melatonin is made in the gut, but also in the pineal gland, and that's your sleep hormone. So as you can imagine, for people who don't sleep, who have issues sleeping, and, maybe aren't producing the melatonin they need to get the proper sleep, how that affects anxiety and depression. And now just to talk about the gut hormone connection. Basically, this is where your gut is where all your nutrients get absorbed. So when you have a gut imbalance, you're really looking at a nutrient deficiency, no matter how good your diet is. So your gut is where you absorb the nutrients needed to produce hormones. If you're not breaking down and absorbing nutrients properly, you won't have the building blocks needed to make hormones like your thyroid hormone, estrogen, progesterone, and cortisol. We need healthy digestion, absorption of fats, nutrients, hormone cofactors such as magnesium, zinc, B vitamins, your omegas, iron, selenium, so that the body can properly create hormone balance. Fats need to be turned into the form of cholesterol to make these hormones. So hopefully you can see how, like, oh yeah, people often come to me with hormone issues, and I once again circle it back to their gut, and they're like, no, I'm talking about my hormones. And so there is such a connection between the gut and the hormones, and usually if the hormones are off, the gut is a good place to look. And another layer to that is when this microbiome is imbalanced, we call this a gut dysbiosis. So the microbiome is the friendly bacteria within the gut that you really want to be diverse and really thriving in your gut. So there's trillions of microbes in your gut. This is known as your microbiome, and they play a role in activating and eliminating certain hormones. For estrogen, there's a group of microbes called the estrobolome, and that helps to regulate levels of circulating estrogen. Normally, after estrogen is deactivated in your liver, they head to your intestines, where most of them will exit the body via the stool. But in case of this estrobolome imbalance, Instead of exiting, most of the estrogens are reactivated and recirculated throughout the body. And this is what leads to what is called estrogen dominance. And this causes symptoms like heavy periods, fibroids, cysts, and also can increase your risk for cervical, breast, or ovarian cancer. Also, gut dysbiosis, this imbalance of bacteria, can also affect your thyroid functioning because about 20% of your thyroid hormones are converted to the active state in your gut. So once again, just the gut is kind of everything. I hope you're starting to see. Yeah. So just wanted to share some action steps here. Like, okay, so there's this leaky gut, and I didn't mention it already. The amount of people that have leaky gut is quite huge. It's not a diagnosis. It's actually just this kind of condition. I've heard certain doctors and practitioners say up to 80% of humans have some degree of it. And I have no doubt, just when you think of our stress levels, when you think of the diet, when you think of the toxins we're exposed to, that we're always trying to combat and do this deeper healing of this gut so we can live our fullest life and have the happiness and have the hormone balance and have the nutrient absorption that we want. So step number one is to remove inflammatory foods. Okay, so that's, of course, processed foods that aren't serving you. And things, this next list is a list of things that can possibly be inflammatory for some people. Is gluten, dairy, alcohol, soy, and sugar are all places that you could assess, like, are these foods at this time causing inflammation? And the way that I really recommend assessing these foods is a food diary. Just by, having a food diary, tracking what you're eating, but also just taking a time where you're like, okay, I'm going to try to go gluten-free for even just a week. And with the diary, really tracking your, how you feel, for one thing. You eat a meal, how do you feel 2 hours later? And then also just really tracking your mood, your satiation, and your overall energy. So that's one way to go about it. I also do food sensitivity testing in my practice, and I love that. They are expensive, so it's kind of like, be in tune and work with a food diary or do the food sensitivity testing, because if there's an underlying gut imbalance, most likely you are probably eating some foods that aren't totally serving you. So you just need for you to personalize that and to figure out what foods those are and take them out for just a time period. You're taking these foods out while you do the deeper healing on your gut. And then usually you can reincorporate these things with moderation. So step number 2 is eradicating the pathogens that might possibly be there. So just talking about things like the parasites, the fungal, the bacterial overgrowth, plus that biofilm I was talking about. So really kind of clearing those from the digestion. And for that, I would never really guess. There are just seasonal things you can do to rebalance, and that can just be great. But if you have something going on and you're having symptoms and you really want to heal it, really testing instead of guessing can provide you a targeted path to healing that. And then open those detox drainage pathways. So we talked about that in a couple slides before, and I talk about this a lot in social media, which is just our body's natural ability to detox. And I'm not going to go too deep into that, but it is just like those certain organs, we have detox organs, and just encouraging them to be optimized in detoxing on a daily basis. And then use targeted personalized supplements to bring balance to whatever you're finding on your testing. And that's what I kind of consider that step 2 to be. And then step 3 is really healing that leaky gut and re-inoculating that gut flora, that microbiome. Some things that can really support that is things like bone broth and collagen, fermented foods. I'm a very avid fermenter, and especially back when I was really trying to heal, I became a fermenting fanatic and was actually wanted to teach everybody how to ferment things because I just thought it was the most amazing healing thing in the world. So fermenting foods at in your home and in your environment is the best way, because when you ferment stuff, say like sauerkraut, we'll talk about, when you're fermenting that cabbage, for one thing, you're breaking down the cabbage so you can absorb the nutrients better, and then you're cultivating the microbes and also the enzymes within that cabbage, and then also the microbes of your environment. So those are all going into the cabbage, which then go into your body and then help you become more resilient to your environment. And then things that I love to work with myself and my clients is castor oil packs. This is kind of an old remedy that's also just super healing, and it just works so well. And for anybody who deals with any kind of gut pain, bloating, doing a castor oil pack on the abdomen, it can be super healing and a good part of this healing the gut lining. Castor oil does an amazing job of bringing down inflammation on whatever you put it on. I've used it to heal carpal tunnel before. I've used it on cystic acne before. But even just doing a pack on the abdomen will help heal the gut. And belly massages, I'm a big fan of, whether this be by yourself or if you go to a massage therapist. We always neck, shoulders, but we just bypass the belly. Get your belly rubbed. This is part of the healing, is to reconnect there and, most likely move through some discomfort and maybe some emotions, but this is part of the gut healing. And really, of course, that stress relief is really important. That breath work is really important. And then visualizing yourself healed. And I always talk about this because you can do all the things. You can eat the food, you can, do the testing, you can take the supplements, but the mind's got to be in it too. Your mind's got to see yourself as healed, especially if you've been working with something chronic, and just see yourself as fully healed, and you're there. And once again, I do work with certain supplements in this step 3 to really heal the gut, and those seem to be very helpful too. And I just wanted to share some testing. This is the GI maps that I work with in my practice. If you've ever done a stool analysis before, maybe you went to the doctors and you were all symptomatic and they were like, oh, you're fine, nothing was detected. The GI maps is a little different because we're looking at everything. We actually look at the friendly bacteria, the good bacteria, we look at the bad bacteria, and we look at the parasites, and then we have all these amazing intestinal health markers at the bottom. These first 2 markers are showing how you're digesting your food. Then you have a detox marker and a marker for possible blood in the stool. This one here that actually was low for this person is an immune system marker. And then we have a gluten marker and an inflammation marker. One thing that came up for this client, and this was interesting because this was one of my clients that, didn't feel like the gut was really an issue, wasn't really feeling like doing the stool analysis. So I actually encouraged her highly to do the stool analysis because she had an autoimmune condition. And I was like, there is this link between gut and autoimmunity. Let's just run the GI maps and just make sure there's nothing going on in the gut. And she came up really high for this parasite. And, it was amazing to work with her and to see her symptoms go from very symptomatic to not, by clearing this parasite from her body and also supporting the other things we saw on this lab test. And this is often something that I find on a stool analysis is this H. pylori. It's an upper GI bacterial infection that messes with your ability to digest your food because it messes with your hydrochloric acid in your stomach. Once again, I've seen so many clients clear this H. pylori at this point and just feel like they can finally digest their food. And I've had clients who just felt like they couldn't gain weight, they felt very frail and like they weren't getting their nutrients, and afterwards just feel like fuller and just like they're finally digesting their food. And then down here, we're actually looking at that microbiome with this normal bacteria flora. So the yellow ones are low, the red ones are high. And this is that dysbiosis. It's that bacterial imbalance. And, very common when the normal bacterial flora is imbalanced, that's when these guys creep in. And these are the opportunistic bacteria, and these are the ones that tend to cause problems when they're overgrown. Yeah, so it's just very comprehensive, and there's even more pages than what I'm showing you here, but I kind of shown you my favorite pages on the GI map. So, and just a reminder here that, this leaky gut, it correlates with so many things. And this comes from other functional practitioners, naturopaths, and other doctors just noticing, and, people like Dr. Axe noticing that this leaky gut is actually at the core of a lot of these issues or diseases. Once again, if you have a gut imbalance and you're loaded with symptoms, it's in my personal opinion that I would actually be proactive. Don't wait down the line until you get a diagnosis of something worse. Really handle your symptoms as they come up, because I really feel like all symptoms are, your body's wanting to try to tell you something. Your body's wanting you to be proactive and to take your health into your hands. So this is my last slide, and just want to say thank you so much for having me. Here's my contact information, and this top website here is my website, which is heartofhealth.com. And there's a couple resources on there I just want to tell you about. There on the front page, there's this giant kind of rugged poppy. If you click on that, it'll lead you to my 3-step guide to stop feeling overwhelmed and to start enjoying and loving life. And that's a great way if you want to stay connected, because if you get that guide, you will be on my monthly email list. And I just do once a month emails, and I usually stay up to date with certain topics. So I really think it's very educational. So that's a great place to stay connected. And then also on my website, on the very far right, if you pull down the contact me, there's this strategy session. And in that strategy session is my complimentary 45-minute session, where it's a place where we get to connect one-on-one, and I really dive into your health history and hear what you're dealing with, and, ask you tons of questions. And at the very end, if it feels like a good fit, I would share more about my work and how we could work together. Here's my email. If you have any questions, you're welcome to email me. I'm really good at responding. And here's also my Instagram and my Facebook. So it's Instagram, Luna Hart of Health. And just if you search for Heart of Health on Facebook, that's my business page. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much, Luna.